It's very contemporary for me because I was in New York during the pandemic. There was a week when we were shooting the morning show in the Colbert Studios, and when
in the Ed Sullivan Theater?
In the Ed Sullivan Theater, because they'd had to shut down the entire broadcast center on 57th Street because people had tested positive for COVID. It was right at the very beginning. It was like literally the second week, and I was like, I need to walk into Times Square. And I left the show that morning and I walked into Times Square, and there was nobody there. All the signs were still going and everything, and I was the only living boy in New York.
Right. And
that came into my head, and it's like it is now a pandemic song for me. All these years after it was originally. I mean, he has a complete. But that's what music can do. It takes on a life of its own once the creator has made it, and it becomes whatever it means to you. That's the power of music.
WLIW-FM, your home for news, music, and entertainment on the East End and beyond.
I'm Brian Cosgrove, and it is my pleasure to be joined by Anthony Mason, who, among other things, is a senior correspondent for CBS's TV News. Anthony, it's a pleasure to see you.
Brian, it's so great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm thrilled as well. You have a new independent show on YouTube, and if you want to find it, you got to put Alchemy first, because you just don't want to do Anthony Mason first, because you're going to go down a rabbit hole
of old Nick's plays.
Oh no!
Oh,
yeah. What you want to do is go to YouTube or go to Google and put Alchemy with Anthony Mason. And this is an in-depth conversation show about the creative process.
Yes.
And I had the pleasure to watch, and I'm all lined up with them. I've got my favorites picked up. I watched the Paul Simon one. Mm-hmm. Next, I think, is going to be Nile Rogers.
The Nile one is really great.
I bet.
He's lived such an incredible life.
Oh, my goodness, yeah. And then Hozier.
Yeah.
Right? He's 6'7" from what I
Somebody told me who had interviewed him said he felt like he was standing next to the center for the Lithuanian basketball team.
Right.
It kind of looks like that.
Very talented Irish singer, songwriter.
Oh, phenomenal.
Yeah. Hozier, you've got Brittany Howard from Alabama
Brittany
Shakes.
Howard is coming up. We've shot it. I think it's the next one. Taj Mahal airs and drops next Wednesday, and then 2 weeks after that is Brittany.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Taj Mahal.
Still going strong.
Yeah, right. In mid-'80s, I would think.
Yes, mid-'80s. Started playing in the late 50s.
Oh, my goodness. That's great. Yeah, and then also you have a few more that'll drop. You had the daughter of...
yes, Violet Grohl, Dave Grohl's daughter, who's been singing since she was like 12. She started singing backup for the Foo Fighters when her dad pulled her, sort of said, "You want to try this?" And at first she didn't, but then she did. And I first saw her when she was just shy of 16. She came on stage at the Music Hairs tribute to Joni Mitchell and sang, and with Joni Mitchell sitting in the front row watching her. And she was phenomenal. And I thought, what 15-year-old has the guts to sing a Joni Mitchell song in front of Joni Mitchell?
Holy smokes.
And after that, I was like, all right, this girl's got something.
Absolutely. So you are a New York City guy.
I'm a New York City guy.
And a Southampton guy.
And a Southampton kid.
Your whole life?
Whole life.
Whole life. You've been
learned to ride a bike out here, all those things.
So you're born in New York City, went to grade school in New York City?
Went to grade school in the city. We'd come out here in the summer. My parents, when I was really little, had a place out in the Art Village that had no heat. So it was literally a summer house. So come Labor Day, it got pretty cold, as I remember. And then I'd rode my bike to the beach every day. And I could still tell you, it's funny, I did it recently. I can still tell you pretty much every crack on the sidewalk from Hill Street up to the Art Village. I was like, God, they haven't changed. The places where the pavement buckles are in the same spots, it's like wild. Yeah. You memorize it as a kid, yeah.
And you're obviously here. You come out all the time still.
We come out. My wife is from Massachusetts, and we spend a lot of time up there when my kids were little. But at a certain point, we were like, it's too far away. And I was like, you know what? I grew up here, and so I've always had a really strong connection to this place for a whole lot of reasons. And my family's been coming here for a very long time. My grandmother was married at the Dune Church in the 1920s.
Wow.
So the connection is pretty deep.
You're a New York guy, New York kid, grew up in the city, and
but this is this is where you learn your freedom as a kid, was in the summer and riding your bike around. So that's what I always associate with this, riding past the old potato fields on my bike and just loving it.
Yeah. Now, this new show, and we're talking with Anthony Mason from CBS News. He's got a new independent show called Alchemy, and it's in-depth conversations about the creative process. And this show is shot in your apartment.
Yes, much to my wife's chagrin.
So you being a seasoned journalist, if you will, and I admire. I'm a fan of your interviewing skills.
Thank you.
Is this kind of like, not that you were looking for it, but you've got home court advantage to a certain extent, right?
Well, it's this thing where, the confines of network TV news are that, you're lucky if your stories run 8 minutes on Sunday morning. That's pretty much optimal, in terms of time. And
right.
I spent a lot of my time, in my first 20 years at CBS, and it's more than 40 now.
Yikes.
Yikes is right. Doing, 2-minute news pieces for the evening news. And in fairness, you learn how to tell a story concisely and on all that, but at a certain point when you get a conversation with somebody that ends up being very dynamic and interesting, and you just want to run the whole thing, and
sure.
And that was part of my frustration, were that the natural limitations of network TV news are that we don't have time for all this
Attention spans and
all those things.
Yeah.
And I I'm all. Listen, I learned a lot about storytelling by being forced to tell a story within time constraints. As my stepfather, who was a painter, used to say, what you leave out is often just as important as what you put in, and so you learn that. But I would have these 45-minute or hour-long conversations with artists that would turn into 8-minute pieces, say for Sunday morning or for the Saturday show, and I go, geez, I'm so sorry, I have to put all this other stuff in the archive. And in most cases, it never gets heard. And I kind of wanted, and the other thing that I felt was that these conversations I would have, whether it was with musicians or with photographers or film directors or painters or writers or whatever it was, there was always something, to me there was a bigger conversation just about the creative process and what it gives us as human beings.
Thank you for that.
Right?
Thank you for that, yeah.
And to me it was always one ongoing conversation that I was having about all of this. And I wanted a home for it. I was like, because at the end of it I always felt better about life. Because the creative process is so human, you're often taking, something that's very sad or traumatic or heartbreaking, whatever it is, and turning it into a song or a play or a book. And that process tends to lift other people up or even inspire them. And so it's very emotional, but not in the way that so much media is these days, which just makes you angry. And I was like, right? It's like I'm so tired of being.
I have to laugh because you're spot on.
It's like I'm so tired of being angry.
Oh my! I'm done. I'm toast.
Yeah, I'm exhausted by it. And I was like, I need to go somewhere. And I found these conversations I'd have, whether it's with Hozier, Paul Simon, whoever it is,
right?
And how them working through whatever they're working through and turning it into a song or whatever, and how it happens, and I would be like, this is really inspiring and uplifting. And
this is what we're here for.
Yes.
This in general. I'm not a philosopher, but I would say this is what we're here for.
Yeah, and I just was like, I want more of this, and I want a regular home for it, so that the people who feel like they need it can go there.
And you've got a New York City apartment that looks very nice, by the way. And I very
my
much...
mother was an interior decorator, and my stepfather was a painter, so I had a head start.
It's like the beginning of a joke or a song. I love the window behind Paul Simon. The lead, the lead glass window behind Paul Simon.
It's a 100-year-old apartment building in New York. It's great.
It's very nice layout. So you enjoy doing it in your home, I would imagine.
I do and I don't. I mean, there's as anybody who's ever been in the midst of a television shoot knows, it's incredibly disruptive. I mean, the crew will arrive at 8:00 in the morning with 15 cases of gear,
right,
and unpack it all over the apartment. So the only thing that actually looks good that day is what's on camera, and everything else looks like a disaster area. So my wife, who teaches at school, fortunately, is usually away during that, and I try to finish before she gets home, but
gotcha.
It doesn't always happen.
I want to just direct folks, if you'd like, if you can go to WLIW.org/radio, and we've got the studio camera going with Anthony Mason, the CBS senior correspondent. And being a senior correspondent, do you get a discount at the commissary?
I'll use every discount I can get at this point.
Exactly.
I'm so proud when I get a senior discount on the LIRR. Like, I paid $9 for whatever it is, $15, I can't remember.
Yeah, I just got a discount for my. I live up on the North Fork, and I'm part of Riverhead Town, and I just got a discount for the parking pass. I said, I'll take it.
Take it.
Yeah.
You know, there was a time where I would have been embarrassed, and now I'm
exactly. No way.
I use my age in every way I possibly can.
Now I actually bring it up from time to time. Well, are there any discounts for this? But so Anthony Mason has got this tremendous independent YouTube show that just debuted back in May, and I urge you to just go check it out. Whether you have time for the full episode, which is really not too much to bite off and chew because they're so great. It's called Alchemy with Anthony Mason, and we were just talking about the fact that he's actually shooting this wonderful in-depth conversations about the creative process in his apartment. So me being the music geek I am, Anthony, I'm like, I spotted a copy of Nuggets in your record collection.
Yes, very good.
Yeah. I spotted that.
It's amazing what people see when they look into your apartment. It's kind of scary.
It looks good. It looks clean, though. You look like you live okay.
My son vacuumed.
Of course, you can't help but see the Born to Run poster.
Yes. It's not actually, it's one of the photographs from the sequence that was the album cover by Eric Miola, who I think lives out here. Actually took that shot, and he hadn't printed them up in I don't think he'd ever printed them up. And all of a sudden I saw one. He put out an edition. I was like, I got to have one. And then I got to interview. I think it was when I interviewed Bruce for his book.
That's a powerful book.
It is. It's a great book. It's among it's my sort of top 5 music biography book.
When he came clean about that, when he hit the wall in the early mid '80s,
yes,
it was extraordinary.
Yeah,
because I've hit those same types of walls, and I was like, holy cow, he was in a rough place.
No, I thought it was an absolutely beautiful book, and those are not easy to write. I mean, I've read a lot of them, and as I'm always,
you have, yeah.
Yeah, well, you kind of, I mean, I like reading them, but I also sometimes, just because a person can write a song well doesn't mean they can write their own story well. It's kind of, you know what I'm saying?
You find that out the hard way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you are a fan. Just like you are a real fan.
I have no musical talent whatsoever.
And I told you I'm the same. That's why I'm a DJ. That's why you do what you do, right? You like to be around.
Well, I had fantasies of being an overnight DJ when I was a kid.
Oh, I bet.
It was like I just thought that sounded like you just kind of sit in a mall by yourself and send music out across the. When I was really actually out here, I used to take my little transistor radio and try to tune in the farthest away radio station I could find.
Sure.
I think those 50,000 watt stations.
Yeah.
Which you could do, and maybe you still can. I haven't done it in a long time, but I remember getting a station in Lookout Mountain, Tennessee, one night out here, and I was like,
probably AM, right?
I think so. And I was just, that. I mean, everything is accessible now in ways that it wasn't then, but then that felt like I was literally traveling.
It was much different.
Oh, yeah.
And I moved out here just about 30 years ago, and for a long time now, like I said, I live on the North Fork, but I lived in Springs.
Yeah.
In East Hampton.
Yeah.
And I was surprised when I first came out here in full-time in the, well, not that I ever came out here part-time, I never could do that, but when I came out here, I found out that a lot of folks were Red Sox fans.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the folks out here could only get New England and Connecticut TV.
Correct.
So a lot of folks love Boston.
Before cable came around, when I was a kid, literally the only TV station you could get out in the Art Village was WTNH in New Haven.
Right.
And they broadcast the Red Sox games.
That's right.
And so that was, I mean, I knew I knew all these shows that I wouldn't have known otherwise because that was literally, the only station you could get.
We're with Anthony Mason from CBS News. He's got a new show on YouTube called Alchemy, and we're going to talk about the Paul Simon interview. He's got others as well, but one of the funny. I went to another place when I put it on, like you were talking about. It's I was like, this is great. I'm sitting here, I'm watching you interview Paul Simon, and I just forgot about everything. I was in the moment. So thank you for that. One of the things I thought was very funny towards the end, you asked him about the Yankees, and he was talking about it, and then you fessed up that you're actually a Met fan. And he's like, he was like, why did you even start this if you're a Met fan? He was so funny.
Yeah, I know. Well, I'd actually driven in a car with him once, like a year or so ago, and the Yankees were playing, and we were coming back from the airport for a story we were doing, and he had to have the Yankee game on the radio, so I knew what a hardcore Yankee fan he was.
Right.
And I'd seen him do a very small concert in which Bernie Williams actually came up and I think played I want to say played. Oh no, he whistled in a song for him, and it meant the world to him that Bernie Williams was there.
Yeah.
You know, and. So I knew what a big Yankee fan he was, and I knew he would get all serious and excited, and then I just loved dropping it. I don't really care. I'm a Mets fan.
And his head almost exploded. He's like, why did you even talk to me like that? Yeah. But I mean, of course, you know, with the Joe DiMaggio and Mrs. Robinson and the fact that hitting Bernie plays center field and he's a guitar player.
Yep.
So there's a big crossover there.
Yes.
So you know what I wanted to do, and I got the okay from you to do this. Like you said, you've been at CBS News. Anthony Mason is with us for a long, long time, and you didn't know him well, but you knew Ed Bradley.
Yep, sure did.
And again, he's another one of my, I would watch
one of my heroes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And when I and I like to think I learned a thing or two about interviewing. I'm not seasoned as I'd like to be, but some of the main things that I pick up from guys like yourself and Ed Bradley and some other folks is that go in prepared, don't go in over prepared, because you may want to throw everything but the kitchen sink in, and you don't want to overthink it. Mm-hmm. The other thing is be in the moment, which is super hard sometimes, to be in the moment and listen to what the person is saying.
It's all about listening.
Isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it took me a long time to sort of learn it, because when you're interviewing for network TV and you're doing shorter stories, everything's going to get cut. So frankly, you get to cover up your mistakes a lot,
right?
Because in the editing room, but you can't in network TV you're not really, the story's not about you, so you're not really supposed to show yourself. So I always thought in terms of, all right, well, how am I supposed to show myself if I'm not supposed to show myself? And then finally I realized, it's in the way you interview. It's in the kind of questions you ask. And so I started really paying attention more than I used to. And that's when I started to notice all these things. And I also, the other thing is the preparation question. You want to have read everything you can find, and then you almost want to forget it.
Exactly. It's like you want to take it all in and then just throw it away and then go in like cold. And
just trust your curiosity.
Yeah, which is such a great way to go. And so, that is, something that I think is very important, and I think you do it very, very well. And before we dive in here, you were nice enough to say, okay, let's play this. This is less than 60 seconds of Ed Bradley interviewing Bob Dylan from a 60 Minutes piece. And this really spoke to me about the heart of what you have been doing with your TV interviews, and even more so now, what you want to do with Alchemy, which is Tony Mason's new show, in-depth conversations about the creative process. You can find it on YouTube. It's called Alchemy. And I want to play this. This is Ed Bradley asking Bob Dylan about the songwriting process.
And look back at it and say, whoa, that surprised me.
I used to. I don't do that anymore. I don't know how I got to write those songs.
What do you mean you don't know how?
Well, those early songs were like almost magically written. Darkness at the break of noon, shadows even the silver spoon, a handmade blade, a child's. Try to sit down and write something like that. There's a magic to that, and it's not Siegfried and Roy kind of magic. It's a different kind of a penetrating magic. And I did it. I did it at one time.
You don't think you can do it today?
Mm-mm.
Does that disappoint you?
Well, you can't do something forever, and I did it once, and I can do other things now.
That's Bob Dylan with Ed Bradley.
It's such a great moment.
Isn't it there?
Yeah, it's just such a great moment.
And you know what? That's what I think of you. I think when you were coming...
I would love to have that moment with Bob Dylan.
But still, that's what you're going... This is
what you're looking
doing.
For.
This is what you're doing, right?
Yeah, and the way Ed handled that was...
perfect, right?
Did that disappoint you? He just gave him enough to keep him going.
And what we talked about being in the moment.
Yes.
He was right there, so...
It's sometimes, what's one thing I love about this part of this job is in the middle of a conversation, somebody will just crack open a door somewhere. And it's like on the side. It's also kind of in the corner of the room, and they make a side reference to something. And you're kind of like, your job is is to see that in the corner of the room,
right?
And go, well, hold a second, go back and wait, what's that door you just slightly opened there?
That reminds me of the old, supposedly Leonard Cohen said, there's a crack in everything so
Yes.
the light can get in.
Yes.
And I don't want to sound too over melodramatic, but that's the thing.
It is the thing.
You strike that chord, that famous book from the 70s, right? That media book. He was a great guy who did media. He was almost as big as Marshall McLuhan. But anyway, the responsive chord.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you want to do. You want to, that old saying, what comes from the heart reaches the heart.
Yep.
That's it. It's just that simple.
I always feel like when I'm in those conversations that my job is for the listener or the viewer to leave with some sense of who this person is. It really is. And that doesn't mean I know your whole life story and all the facts in your life story, because frankly, you can get a moment just like that's 60 seconds long that tells you so much about a person.
Right.
And that's what you're looking for. All the basics. I can look up when Bob Dylan was born, on Wikipedia, how many kids he has or whatever. It's that stuff that makes you go, oh, now I think I have some sense of who this guy is. Which is the whole game.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just want to remind folks, if you're just joining us, I'm talking with Anthony Mason, senior correspondent for CBS News. He's got a brand new independent YouTube show called Alchemy with Anthony Mason, in-depth conversations about the creative process. And he's got a great kickoff lineup. He's got about a half a dozen of them already in the can, as they say, so you can just find them. Alchemy with Anthony Mason. He is a New York City, East End of Long Island guy from day one, and it's so much fun to have him in here on the Afternoon Ramble. You can go to WLIW.org/radio. We have the cam going on. I usually don't like it when I'm by myself, but since we have someone who's so photogenic as Anthony Mason, and
no lights, no makeup.
That's right.
Sorry,
I'm old enough. I didn't get into radio to be on camera, and I have, you have a face for both.
No, that's why I wanted to be on radio. TV paid a little better.
But we are. Anthony is kind enough to spend a July afternoon. He's going to stay here for a little while. We've got him for a little bit, and we're going to talk about this because, and this is the beauty, Anthony. I am so grateful that I'm part of this radio station, this not-for-profit radio station, where I can have someone like you, who happens to be out here. The geographics work out well. It's a beautiful place, and there's some well-known and not so well-known folks that occasionally come through the radio station, and we can take time and we can talk about it. Sure, I'm concerned about ratings and I'm concerned about cume and I want to keep everything going, but that's not what not-for-profit media is about. What this is about is what you're doing with Alchemy, is to dig in to subjects and say, hey, look, absolutely, go put on, a magazine show on commercial media. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Go watch, do this. But not for profit or, public media, let's dig in a little bit. Let's talk about things. And if we lose your attention, so be it. But, look, I got Anthony Mason here, and we're gonna have some fun, and we're gonna talk a little bit. And Paul Simon is who I want to get in the weeds about, because it's such an extraordinary interview you did with him, and he's back at Forest Hills Tennis Stadium tonight.
He was there last night. He's there tonight. Yeah,
which I found, Anthony, pretty amazing that he did back-to-back nights, because as you well know, these guys who, and thank goodness, McCartney and the Stones and the Who just maybe are calling it a day, are in their 80s. They never do back-to-back nights.
No, it's I don't know how they do the schedules they do.
Exactly.
Frankly, at this point.
Even Springsteen usually doesn't do a back-to-back night. And the fact that Paul Simon was last night and he's going to do another night tonight, and he's, 84?
Yeah.
And he looks tremendous on the interview.
He's physically in great shape. I've walked around with him a bit. We did a thing for CBS, I think it was last year or the year before, and he's very spry. And obviously mentally he's in great shape. It's just, it's like, but I don't care how great shape you are at 84. You just don't have the same, you don't have the same engine you used to have. I can tell you, because I'm now 70 and I know. No, and I'm 65 and forget it. Yeah, but he's what's so fascinating about what he's done, because as he talks about in Alchemy, and I've interviewed him about it before. He lost almost all of his hearing in, I think it was his right ear. It's one of his ears. And so he had to, I think he was actually quite depressed for a period of time because he thought he wasn't going to be able to perform again.
Yeah, he was.
But they managed to figure out a way to get enough sound to him that he can hear, as he says, and I didn't realize this till he said it in Alchemy, he can't hear the entire band behind him, but he can hear enough that he can keep going. Because as he said, I know what they're playing, I wrote it, which I thought was pretty funny.
Yeah. Or he trusts the musicians so much.
He trusts the musicians.
But you're right, though. He knows what's going on.
He's got first-class musicians. He knows they can handle it. And
no question. Yeah.
And he's made all the arrangements softer and more intimate. And what's so interesting is you actually, when you're at his concerts now, you hear each instrument.
You saw him at the Beacon recently.
I saw him at the Beacon. I saw him at the Beacon, and I saw him at something called Soho Sessions, which was when he kind of made a test run of this new sort of lower
lo-fi?
Yeah, not lo-fi, but lower decibel.
Right, he talked about decibels.
Yeah, and because he's very aware of that now because of his hearing. And the Beacon show was phenomenal. And the musicianship and because he's not trying to overpower you, everything hits you. It's really intimate. And you hear these songs in kind of a new way.
Gotcha.
That my wife was like, I've never heard these songs like this before. And my son, who went a different night than I did, texted me in the middle of, I talk about this with Paul, but in the middle of Renee and Georgette Magritte with their dog after the war. And he said, I'm literally crying listening to this.
I heard you say that, yeah.
And, it's just, you also realize as you hear it how much, his music is woven into your life. It's extraordinary.
It is extraordinary.
And so it's that wave that engulfs you as well. But to hear all of that in a new way is really quite a fascinating experience.
Anthony Mason is with us, senior correspondent for CBS News. That's where you know him from. But he has just started a new YouTube show called Alchemy with Anthony Mason, in-depth conversations about the creative process. We're going to talk about the Paul Simon one, which is up now. Do yourself a favor. Give yourself 45 minutes, that's it, and just sit down and watch it, or, in pieces. But I'm going to play a little bit of music here from Paul Simon, and I'm going to start with this song from So Beautiful or So What? Mm-hmm. Because to me, Paul Simon is, and this is subjective, so I don't want to, get, this is not a competition, but he to me is as good as it gets as far as songwriting go, and especially as far as longevity goes.
Yeah.
He did the 70s, he did the 80s, he did the 90s. This album, he did a handful of albums, most recently Seven Psalms, which I haven't listened to, but it's a tremendous album. I've heard it. And then the last few, this one is from, I believe, 2010, So Beautiful or So What? And the whole album just floors you. And this is a song, Anthony, you may be familiar with, he mentions Montauk Highway. He mentions the cliffs, meaning probably he wrote it maybe out here, or he's talking about referring to his home in Montauk. Because, like you, he's a New York City East End guy forever. And that's one of the reasons why I like this song so much. So we're going to come back with Anthony Mason, talk about his recent interview with Paul Simon, who's back at Forest Hills Tennis Stadium tonight. But this is called Dazzling Blue. And again, listen for the Montauk Highway reference. Paul Simon on WLIW-FM. WLIW-FM, Simon and Garfunkel, of course, the only living boy in New York. I'm here with Anthony Mason, who is a senior correspondent, you may know, for CBS News, but he has just launched a brand new independent YouTube program called Alchemy with Anthony Mason. Just Google it or go to YouTube and put Alchemy with Anthony Mason in there. In-depth conversations about the creative process. And Paul Simon are one of the interviews that he has already taped that you can go and watch right now, or after you listen to me and Anthony, then watch it. Don't watch it right now. But I was thinking about that song. I was thinking of that song while you two guys were talking. Because you were in New York City. He's shooting it. Anthony Mason is shooting it in his apartment, which is, I just love that aspect of it as well. So I'm thinking, here they are, these two guys, two New York guys and East End of Long Island guys, talking about things they love. And that, of course, was the alienation. I'm sure you know the story behind that song. He felt alienated, right? Art Garfunkel was off shooting a movie.
Right.
I think, and he was like, he I don't know if he'd written Bridge yet, but Bridge was like, he got a lukewarm response from Art over the phone or something about it.
Yeah.
And he was like, what's going on here?
Yeah. It's funny because my association with that song is, I think of it, it's very contemporary for me because I was in New York during the pandemic, and I remember walking into, there was a week when we were shooting the morning show in the Colbert Studios, and when
in the Ed Sullivan Theater?
In the Ed Sullivan Theater, because they'd had to shut down the entire broadcast center on 57th Street because people had tested positive for COVID. It was right at the very beginning. It was like literally the second week, and I was like, I need to walk into Times Square. And I left the show that morning, and I walked into Times Square, and there was nobody there. All the signs were still going and everything, and I was the only living boy in New York.
Right. And
that came into my head, and it's like, it is now a pandemic song for me. All these years after it was originally. I mean, he has but that's what music can do. It takes on a life of its own once the creator has made it, and it becomes whatever it means to you. That's the power of music.
Absolutely, it is, and that is something that you struck on, and that's the reason of your program, Alchemy, is to talk about the creative process. Talk about, why do these? I don't want to say they get a second life, but you can identify on different levels with a song like "The Only Living Boy in New York," or, now when I listen to, because of the way things have been going for the last decade or so, I listen to "American Tune" by Paul Simon, and it rips me apart, but then it also gives me hope.
Yes.
And that song was written in 1970 or thereabouts.
Yeah.
I mean, and talk about what comes from the heart reaches the heart, and talking about applying to the now. What a gift to be able for Paul Simon to be able to get that.
He has, I think, it may be the most extraordinary catalog in American music. I don't know of anybody whose catalog is as deep. I mean, the deep cuts are extraordinary songs themselves, even though they're not as widely known.
Yeah.
And something like, I was talking about Renee and Georgette Magritte with their dog after the war. Who writes a song like that?
Right.
He's written great pop hits. He's across 3 decades, in different genres, and soloing with Art Garfunkel. And it's an incredible catalog that's so durable.
Oh my gosh,
you can go back to it and reinvent it, as he's done with a lot of these songs himself. And I think, you always look around and go, who are the songwriters from our lifetime who people may listen to in 50 years? And I think he's a certainty to be on that list.
Well, you alluded to the fact that he said, Sounds of Silence.
Mm-hmm.
That was, and that really encapsulates what you're doing with Alchemy. He said, I was a 22-year-old kid.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't, I shouldn't be able to write songs like Sounds of Silence, but I wrote it.
Yeah.
And he said, if I'm going to be remembered, and he will be, as we both know, in 100 years, that's going to be one of the songs he's remembered for.
Yeah.
And, if you're remembered in 100 years from now, you'll be remembered in 200. That's what I was thinking. You know what I mean? If you make it to 100, Paul Simon's going to be remembered in 200. But you're absolutely right.
He said something to me, though, in an earlier interview, which I was really impressed by. I mean, one of the things that's always struck me about popular culture is it's vicious. When popular culture is done with you, it's done with you, and it doesn't care who you are anymore. And I asked him once about legacy, and I said, this was in an interview I did with him for CBS, and I said, do you care about legacy? And he said, no. He said, no. He said, basically he said, I've done my work, and if it lasts, it lasts. But you can't control whether it lasts. He said, people decide what they need and what they value.
Right.
The rest of that is beyond your control. So I think you have to write a song, that somehow is so well constructed it can survive a century.
Yeah.
Meaning it has to have different layers of meaning in it that will surface over time to different people in different ways.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's It's something that just happens. Like they talk about the magic and being which I love, being a conduit. I mentioned to you, I had the pleasure a few times to talk to Jimmy Webb about it, and you're going to get this reply, and you've already gotten this reply a few times on your show Alchemy, Anthony. Is that how did you come about with that? I don't know.
Yeah.
It fell in my lap.
Yeah.
It just came out on my pen, or I was playing the guitar.
Yeah.
I said, "Whoa, that's something." And then it wrote itself, which is extraordinary.
It's what Tom Petty said, which was that it's the only place I know that magic is real, and that's why it's part of why I titled the show Alchemy, because I've always loved that word. I just love the way it sounds, but it's about this sort of medieval. It was part science, but also part magic, and to turn something into gold, literally, and. I think it's, even the best songwriters will tell you they have really good days and they don't know what happened. I mean, Paul, you were talking about Sound of Silence. Paul wrote that in his bathroom when he was 22 years old. And I just looked at him and I was like, what the hell was that? And he goes, I couldn't tell you.
Exactly.
He said, I went to a whole different level of songwriting. I wasn't there yet. And then I was. And he said it happened to me, I think he said several times. He said it happened with... it'll come to me in a second, but he said it's happened to me a few times,
right?
And each time I just looked at it as a gift, and you can't quite explain it.
It's such a fascinating, and I love the premise of your show, Anthony, Alchemy, in-depth conversations about the creative process, and we're talking with Anthony Mason, longtime CBS senior. Correspondent, CBS News TV correspondent. You can go to WLIW.org/radio. We've got the webcam on. You can see Anthony in our studio. We're so proud to have him here in Southampton. Or, we're here at the Afternoon Ramble. You hear the show every day at noon to 4 on the weekdays, and noon to 3 on the weekends. I'm Brian Cosgrove. Such a delight to be able to talk to somebody who I admire so much with the interviews that he has done so far and will do now with Alchemy. And we're talking about the premise of his show. And I was last night, as I tend to do, scrolling through my phone. It's like it's attached to my hip. I got to get rid of this damn thing. I know, right? I hate it, and then I go back to it. So it's a love-hate relationship.
It's an addiction problem.
So exactly. So I'm flipping through, and I see this 60-second clip of John Cleese, of course, of Python fame and a great actor, and he is talking about exactly what I'm going to come in tomorrow. This is last night, and I'm looking forward to talking to you about everything. And he says he's talking about fear is deadly to the creative process.
Oh, man.
Fear of making a mistake will blow you out of the water. Don't go there. And like you were talking, you can't do that.
Of course, it's the most natural thing to feel. And I know. I think so much. You have to be conditioned to somehow to understand how much fear is the enemy. And because it's such a natural thing to feel, and I've certainly been guilty of it. It's like I grew up in a family with two very creative people who were immensely talented, and there was part of me that was like, I can't possibly live up to what they did,
right.
And I've seen. I was talking to the band Moona recently, and one of the members there had several family members who were virtuoso musicians and felt not talented because I'm not talented like they were. And but
don't let that keep you.
Their talent was just in a slightly different lane, and that's the thing. And I know, growing up with my stepfather, who was a painter, who had one of the most extraordinary eyes I've ever encountered as a human. I mean, he wanted to be a design director when he came out of college for magazines, and then became an illustrator because he loved travel and meeting really attractive women. But he was just an amazing draftsman, drawer. He was so richly talented that I honestly thought I didn't have an eye. I just thought I saw through his eyes, which I did because it was such a distinct vision. And it was only later when I realized, when I was doing television, that I was like, no, you have an eye. It's just different. But part of the reason that you were so taken with what he was doing is because you have an eye too.
That's right.
And you have to kind of get out of your own way sometimes. And that's, as you say, getting over fear which comes up, over and over again. I was looking at an old interview I did with Bill Withers, and he was, who stopped writing songs late in age. And I said, would you ever write another song? And he said, well, if I did, I would write a song about how fear comes and how many disguises it comes in. And I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, not to be melodramatic, but I mean, stepping out of bed is facing a fear every day, right?
It's so true.
Isn't it?
It's so true.
I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm, but it's true. I mean, fear is such a big part of what I on a daily basis, I try to address and, and find the good in everything. And,
it's actually a question I ask a lot of artists is like, what part of this process, sort of lifts you up the most? I mean, what actually kind of gets you out of bed in the morning? Because I know that's what gets me out of bed sometimes. It's like oh, I get to do this interview with somebody, and
exactly, yeah.
And whereas the rest of the day doesn't look quite as interesting.
Well, I was raring to, I knew, we scheduled this like a couple of weeks ago or thereabouts, and we met a couple of years ago at the East Hampton Library's Authors Night, and I was so excited to get here today. It really,
Me too.
Well, thanks, and that's great to hear, and I look forward.
I pass the studio all the time, and I'm just like, oh, that's such a cool looking place.
Well, and now we got you. So it's really and every day, to be honest with you, I come in here and I get to play music and I get to talk about things that are happening on the East End and Southern New England, and I love this place, and for warts and all. The traffic and the cost of living and everything. Yeah. But I'm so fortunate, and we're still plugging along here, not for profit. We're up against a lot of, defunding, as you well know. We were talking about this. You have a not-for-profit that sponsors Alchemy with Anthony Mason, your new YouTube show. And it's just, you got to just keep on plugging and be glad. And when Paul Simon, one of the interviews that Anthony has up on Alchemy, was talking about when he gets that gift, or when it starts to run through him, that he's on to some really good song, that you get the brain chemicals, the dopamine and the serotonin. So it's like once you get on to it gets better and better once you tap into that.
There's something about writing a great line that's just intoxicating.
Yeah.
I've asked a lot of people about it. I was telling you before we went on the air that for a story that I did for CBS a little over a year and a half ago, I actually went down to Nashville to write a song with two, professional Nashville songwriters, Natalie Hemby, who sings with the Highwomen and who's written for Casey Musgraves and Miranda Lambert, and with Mike Elizondo, who's worked with Eminem and the Brothers Osborne. I mean, it's the range of the people these were two absurdly talented people, and I'm sitting in the room trying to write a song with them.
That's good for you.
I'd met Natalie and doing a story with her, and I just loved her. She's a ridiculously funny, talented woman, and I said, would you ever be up for this? And she said, come on down, let's do it. And she came in with a lovely little melody that we just that Mike started on the keys. He was playing keys and kind of just went off with. And all of a sudden we started writing this beach song, because Natalie and I both love the beach. And she said, I'd seen your pictures on Instagram. Let's write a beach song. So we did. And in 3 hours, somehow this song came out that's really quite lovely.
Oh, okay.
And
well, next time you come back, we'll play it. How's that?
I said to her, people said to me afterwards, "Oh man, you wrote that song. It was a great song," because we played the whole thing on the morning show. And and I said, something happened. I said, I can't tell you what happened in that room. I said, I was in the room. So I was definitely part of it, but whatever that is, it's some weird mix of.
You went somewhere.
Yeah, and we all, when we were kind of done, looked at each other and was like, "Well, that's actually pretty good."
And no one spiked the coffee,
No, no. I said, well, now I have the song that we're going to play at my funeral. I don't know if it'll go anywhere else, but.
Well, it was funny that just thinking about this now is that Paul Simon talked about psychedelics.
Yes.
Which was this interview, Anthony. I really got to hand it to you. It's such a great interview with Paul Simon. It really is on Alchemy on the YouTube channel. It's so good. And he talks about the fact that psychedelics will make you feel like it, but it won't get you there. And he wasn't shooting them down. And I'm not here to be pro or con psychedelics or not.
Yeah.
He was just so matter of fact. It was so genuine and so matter of fact. He's like, you'll get the feeling, but you won't get the content, I think is what he was saying, right?
Yeah, I mean, because if you he's talked about seven Psalms, this new album of his, most of which the lyrics came to him in a dream.
Yeah.
A series of dreams at very early hours of the morning. And I remember the first time I talked to him, which was before this Alchemy interview. I said, "What do you make of that?" And he goes, "I don't question it. I just take it and run with it."
Right.
And which I thought was really interesting, because I'm the kind of guy who go, "What was that? Where did that come from? What's that all about?" And he's just like, "No, I got some lyrics here. I'm running with this. Here we go.
Just keep it simple.
Just keep it simple and go." And it that's in addition to fear. The other thing that can drive you nuts is if you're trying to create something is doubt.
Yes.
And they go hand in hand in a lot of ways. And
you can't be afraid to be vulnerable.
Can't be afraid to be vulnerable.
I'm terrified of it.
Oh yeah. It's about being pure. It's about being brutally honest
and not editing yourself and just like throwing it out.
I saw that the first time I ever saw that was there was a company called IDEO, which would come up with new ideas for things, and they had a session that I sat in on when I was doing a piece for Sunday Morning many years ago, and they were just trying to redesign a new office cubicle, which sounds really boring.
But it's not really.
But there were about 20 people from the staff sitting around in a room, and they said, "Okay, throw any idea out you got. It doesn't matter how stupid it is." And I heard some of the stupidest things I'd ever heard. And I was like, "Really?" And they're like, "Yes, and here's why. Because you have to open yourself up to literally everything, or you will edit and question yourself to the point sometimes you miss the best thing in there."
And then we're back to, there's a crack in everything, so the light gets in.
Yes.
So that you're there like, what was that one little bit of something really stupid that could be something?
It's I think people have different times of the day when they're sort of most open to things. I write most of my scripts at first thing in the morning at like 8 a.m.
Okay.
Because I tend to, like, if I'm writing a piece for Sunday morning that's 8 minutes long, I've probably gone through the interview, structured I want all the quotes to go,
right.
And then I'll dump that in my brain before I go to sleep, and then when I wake up in the morning, I don't know what happens, but it's like it just goes, oh, this goes here, this goes here, this goes here, and you write these lines and it's done. And there's something that happens in the brain.
Yeah.
While it's resting, that organizes ideas. And
that I had my mentor who helped me get into radio, for lack of a better thing, and putting together a playlist. He said early on, it's like a jigsaw puzzle.
Yes.
It's like a jigsaw puzzle, and don't force the pieces,
right?
And just go with it. And you just reminded me of that, because there is you keep on doing it, and then all of a sudden, okay, put it down.
Yeah.
Come back to it in the morning.
Yeah.
That's why I love that thing. Sleep on it.
Yeah.
I used to always say I'm a very anxious person. I want to get things done. No, I don't want to sleep on it. I want to get it done. And I want to make sure it's done. But you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
You got to beat the heck out of it. Okay, now put it away, and you wake up in the morning, and all of a sudden, all right, it comes together.
It's like your brain did all the work overnight,
right?
And figured it out, and when you wake up in the morning, it's kind of there. I don't know what happens.
Yeah, I need more of that in my personal life.
It doesn't work in my personal life. It works writing scripts. That much I know.
This is WLIW-FM, listener-supported public radio for the eastern half of Long Island and southern New England. This is the Afternoon Ramble. I'm Brian Cosgrove. Thrilled to have Anthony Mason with me, the longtime senior correspondent with CBS News. He's kicked off a brand new independent YouTube show that I couldn't recommend higher. It's called Alchemy with Anthony Mason. In-depth conversations about the creative process. He's got a ton of folks that you know all about. Paul Simon, Hozier, Nile Rogers, Brittany Howard of Alabama Shakes, and others. There are more to come, and it's not going to be just music, right? You're going to talk to other folks in the arts,
I think it's I've always felt it was a bigger conversation, as I was saying to you earlier. I mean, I think in so many ways this comes out of watching my stepfather paint out here when I was a kid.
Right.
He literally, when I was a teenager and in my earlier years, he painted in a garage off Wickapog Road on what's called Red Top Farm. It's actually still there.
Nice.
And he would paint when I was little, he was painting these enormous artichokes, which were green in the beginning and then all of a sudden became blue and red and burgundy and all kinds of different colors. And I was like, what is going on with this guy, you know? And my friends were like, what is the artichoke fetish? But I think I was he was a very quiet man. He painted out, I mean, in the beginning, he came out here in the summers, but later on, he moved out here full time and worked out of a studio here. And I think I was just incredibly curious about what was happening because right. I'd go off in the morning on my bike and there'd be the outline of something and then I'd come back and all of a sudden it had color and more shape and texture and he was a very, one thing I did learn watching him is he was very disciplined and was always in the studio at the same time every morning. This is not a man who, as there's the famous phrase, inspiration is for amateurs, and he took that. I mean, he took that to heart. He was in the studio. If he had a good day, he had a good day. If he had a bad day, he had a bad day. But he was always there.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And I think so much of my curiosity of all these processes comes from watching him.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that with us because you made me think of. I lived up. I mentioned this earlier. When I first moved out here in the late '90s, I was up in Springs, up in Clearwater, not far from the Jackson Pollock house.
Oh yeah.
And I remember, and I was living up in a section in a neighborhood called Clearwater up in Springs, and I was working at a radio station in Amagansett, and I was doing the morning show, and I would come down in the morning, and every day I would drive by the house, which is now a museum, as you probably know.
Yeah, been there.
Right, and they have the shed, and then I was still living up there when Ed Harris was shooting the movie, which is a tremendous movie.
Yes, I've
the
seen
Pollock
it. Yes.
movie, right? And when he talks about when he discovers when he finds his voice, it happened in that shed, the drip and the expressionism. It really happened out here on the East End, and it just kind of I still get kind of like goosebumps about it, thinking about what a powerful moment and moments.
The whole art world changed in that house.
Exactly. And de Kooning was out here because of the shadows, and your stepdad was here in Southampton because it's such a beautiful place. This place, these guys didn't come here. This place spoke to them.
They came for the light.
Yeah, that's what I keep hearing.
Yeah, they came for the light. It's just, I was on the beach for a cookout last night, and I was like, I was explaining to some people who had just come in from Nashville, and they're like, well, what is it about this place? I said, well, look at this sunset.
Right.
I said, it's the light. And I said, this is the reason people are here. You can talk about everything else in the Hamptons, but I said the reason the artists come is the light. And I would encourage everybody, by the way, to go to the Pollock Krasner house. I'm embarrassed to say I didn't go until like sort of the end of the pandemic when my daughter and I made the trek because we needed a field trip and. Right. The floor in his studio and the
most famous floor in the world, they call it.
It's pretty close. It looks like a Pollock painting. It's probably worth like $50 million if you just cut the floor out and put it up on the wall. But you feel it just walking in that studio.
No question. Yeah.
And I'm so glad they saved it. And there's a big show, I believe, in the fall at the Metropolitan Museum in New York of Pollock and Lee Krasner, whose work I also love, and she was there too.
Right, yeah. And you got when you go, if folks who've already gone, we're singing to the choir, we're preaching to the choir. But if you haven't gone, when you go into his painting shed, which is right next to the house, you got to take your shoes off and put these little booties on because they don't want you to damage the floor that he did all these masterful drip paintings.
And it's
on.
a really modest little place.
Sure is.
He moved out there, I think, in the
40s, I think.
Yeah, in the late 40s.
He would come out from the city.
Yeah, and I don't know that it even had heat in the beginning. I don't think it didn't.
It didn't, yeah. Very powerful movie and story about Pollock and all the artists out here. And I do want to remind folks that, the nice thing about Anthony Mason, not only because, I was telling folks, I've been telling folks, friends of mine and so forth, I'm like, Anthony Mason's coming on with me. And they're like, who's that? I said, I was
the basketball player on the Knicks.
Exactly. No, I said, the guy who does the great interviews on, Sunday morning or Saturday morning, and he's been, I love that guy. And I got to tell you, and I don't want, embarrass you. I must have told a half a dozen people that he was coming, and they got it. They knew who you were. I love that guy. And there's a way that you have with people that makes them comfortable. And I love the idea that you've got this new show, Alchemy with Anthony Mason, on YouTube. Google it. Go to YouTube, search it, Alchemy with Anthony Mason. He's shooting it in his New York City apartment. And it's just a great conversation with him and all these wonderful, talented folks talking about the creative process. And I'm so glad I get and you're an East End guy. You love the East End of Long Island. You're a New York City guy, so you're a local guy, which I love as well. And we're very dedicated to serving the eastern half of Long Island and southern New England with what we do here. It's a very unique radio station. And it's
a vital radio station.
Well, thank you we appreciate that, because we've been up against defunding, and the pledge drives haven't been what we wanted. And I did want to mention before, I want to play something from Hozier, because you spoke to Hozier, the 6'7" Irishman who's very talented.
Yeah,
he's also part of these series of interviews that Anthony has up on Alchemy. But the fact that I forgot what I was talking about.
It happens to me all the time. I'm glad to hear it happens to you.
Yeah. I forgot where I was going with this. But anyway, I wanted to talk about the fact that you have a not-for-profit that sponsors your show.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing that up, because it's called the Flag. It's called the Flag Art Foundation.
That was a close one.
Yeah, I would have brought it back there eventually. No, it's actually Glenn and Amanda Furman who have this a nonprofit called the Flag Art Foundation, which is actually doing incredible work with the parish. They're supporting, I think, 5 shows a year at the parish,
right?
But they also support shows all over in the city. They have their own gallery, and they supported some musical events I've been to, and I reached out to them because they do amazing work supporting artists. Glenn and Amanda are big art collectors themselves. But I reached out and I said, I know this isn't what you typically do, but would you consider it? And they came back and said, we want to do this. And they've been enthusiastic supporters, and this would not have happened without them.
Yeah.
We couldn't have gotten off the ground without them. So we're incredibly grateful to Glenn and Amanda Furman and the Flag Art Foundation, because they're doing a lot of really great stuff out here.
The Flag Art Foundation. And again, there's room enough for everybody. There's room enough for commercial media.
Yes.
And there's room enough for not-for-profit. And, I think at this point, Anthony, it's kind of discouraging with the defunding, but not-for-profit media and not-for-profit in general is baked into the American experience.
Yeah.
And to try to yank it away because of, you think of an ideology, and we don't want to go too far there. But to try to yank it away, it doesn't work, I don't think. I mean, there's the fact that we can sit here, I can talk to you, and we can play. I play 2 songs, in 1 hour, but we get to talk about your wonderful new show and the creative process and the East End of Long Island, and we can, as they say, drill down into it. That's the beauty of it, with no commercials. That's the beauty of it. There's nobody, we don't have any stockholders saying, where's the profit, where's the cum, where's the ratings, where's this, where's that. We're doing it art for art's sake. And I'm not patting myself on the back, don't get me wrong, because who knows if we're going to be here in 3 months, 6 months with the way things are. But I'd just like to remind folks that you're extending yourself with a not-for-profit, the Flag Art Foundation. We're trying to make a go of it here, and we hope folks will realize that don't push us out here, because it's important stuff. It's very important stuff to dig deep on things. It's a really difficult media landscape right now for everybody. I don't care whether you're profit or non-profit, commercial or
It's I mean, I'm seeing it in network TV. With ratings erosion, and the audience has been. It's just everything has been splintered and going in different directions, and so trying to make something that is viable economically is really hard. And I think it's going to be a period of time where everything it reminds me of what happened to the music business, where it got disrupted, and then it took about a decade for it to
find its footing again.
How they create a new model that works, at least for the labels. I would argue that it's not working as well for the artists, but they're still in business.
Yeah, it's and that kind of I was thinking about that as well as with your the premise of Alchemy, talking about the creative process with these wonderful artists, is that it's so different now in 2026 as it was to when. You think about guys like Paul Simon and Billy Joel and Bruce Springsteen that, they had to sign a 5-album deal in 5 years, and they had to write an album.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They had to do it.
Now you're lucky if you get one.
Exactly, right? And, they're under the gun. And these guys had the goods, evidently, to do it. Yeah. I mean, I've had the pleasure to touch base with Billy Joel. I've seen numerous interviews with Bruce Springsteen. These guys were going to get dropped by Columbia. These guys.
Bruce's first 2 albums were considered failures,
and they're as far as I'm concerned, they're hands down classics.
Yes, they are.
Right. So he had to take it to the next level, which thankfully he did with Born to Run. And then Billy Joel was on the verge of a couple of albums of getting nixed from Columbia. I mean, he put out Turnstiles. That album is so great. It was a commercial failure. Yeah. If he didn't get The Stranger, he might have lost his contract.
Yeah.
And then Paul Simon, I'm sure, was under the gun. With some type of contract, and so many artists were. It's not like that anymore, but it's different because there's so many different areas to get your whatever it might be.
It's better and it's worse. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, the better part is you can you can throw a song up on YouTube or TikTok or wherever it is, and people will find it and all of a sudden discover you, and that's happening to a lot of people.
It's got to be pretty catchy or pretty good.
Correct. I mean, you get these little it's actually not even a song. It's like a fraction of a song that gets put in a TikTok video for 15 seconds and explodes. It's happened over and over again.
Right.
And the problem is then. I think it used to be that it was the labels that went out, found artists, and then signed them to, as you say, like a 5-record deal, and they would try to build the artist over time.
Yeah,
doesn't happen anymore. There's no artist. First of all, they don't really have the people going at. They're looking for people who spike on TikTok. Then they give them a 1-album deal, and if it doesn't work,
they like this.
Then they're done with you. Yeah. And also the other problem is that what you're seeing with a lot of young artists now is if they take off on TikTok, they literally explode, and it becomes international, and it's just it's an extraordinary thing to see. But they're often not prepared for it, and they also often haven't done a lot of live performing. That was the other thing you saw. I mean, going back to the Beatles, obviously, and they're the biggest example of this. Right. I mean, they played in clubs in Hamburg, Germany for, literally 6 hours a day, for a couple of years.
And that's how they cut their teeth.
And that's how they learned how to hold an audience and play shows.
That's right.
And so all of that's changing, and what you hear from you. And the other thing is, you see there's a lot of young artists who are having mental health issues. I think partly because this stuff comes in them. It's so fast. And also now the audience out there can comment on anything you do. So if you're not super sure of yourself, and who was at the age of 20,
I'm still not.
Right? I'm still working on it.
Yeah.
Your every little aspect of what you do from,
is scrutinized to it.
Is scrutinized. I was sitting in a nail salon with Lola Young, doing a story on her about a year and a half ago. Phenomenal artist, great singer. I still remember driving down the road out here and hearing Messy for the first time.
What an amazing!
And going, who the hell is that?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I haven't heard anything like this on the radio with some real bite to it in a long time. And so we went out and found her and ended up doing a story on her. And we're sitting in a nail salon, and I got the first manicure I ever had for television. And she's getting her nails done, and she's literally watching the woman in the salon do her nails, and she's going, I can see the TikTok comments now. Your hands are so ugly. You're whatever. And I'm like, and I said to her, can you take all of that out of your head? And she just said, no.
It's hard.
Yeah, and I really felt for her in the moment, because I'm like, this is a young woman who's just trying to be a singer.
Exactly.
And she's already feeling all of this judgment on how she looks and everything she does. And it used to be that, you built an audience in clubs or whatever and grew, and you weren't subject to that kind of scrutiny.
Absolutely.
And I think that's really scary.
It is very scary. I couldn't agree with you more. Like you said, I mean, it's interesting the way that, like you said, the Beatles, they became a great bar band for years. And I've heard all of them talk about it in interviews through the years about those guys were a great band, and when you see them on Ed Sullivan, they're not nervous. Mm-mm. They're not. They might be somewhat, like what's going on here, mm-hmm. but those guys were so tight at that point.
Yeah.
They were. This is just playing another theater for them.
Mm-hmm.
And the other idea of, that they put out 2 albums a year, or, like I was thinking the other day, I played something from Joe Jackson, and I realized that Look Sharp and I'm the Man
mm-hmm.
both came out in 79.
Yeah.
2 albums.
Yeah.
And they're both, I consider, classics. And Joe Jackson, I love all his stuff, all his different genres. But this is crazy stuff when you think about it,
mm-hmm.
to be every year have to put out an album, or like with the Beatles and all those other guys.
It was at least 2 a year, sometimes more, yeah.
Where's the single? People are going to forget about you in 3 months. Where's the next single? And we talk about you talk about the creative process so well with your new program, Alchemy, is that pressure is not good, but these guys, I think of the people in like the Brill building,
mm-hmm.
sitting in those rooms with an upright piano saying, let's write a hit.
Yeah.
9 to 5, Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
And sometimes I guess you do tap into something like you did in Nashville when...
I think that the Nashville scene has always fascinated me, and part of the reason I wanted to go down there was because they do have, it's a business, songwriting in Nashville, but I'd hear these stories of 4 people in a room who didn't even know each other sit down and write a song that becomes a massive hit. And I would be like, how does that happen?
Yeah.
I mean, I have a hard enough time sharing anything in my life with somebody I don't know.
Right.
And I can't imagine, maybe it's easier if you don't know them if you're writing a song, but I just found that was, and that's why when I called Natalie Hembia, who's that's what she does for a living, and she's brilliant at it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's there's a craft to it.
There is.
There's absolutely a craft to it.
Yeah, you can minor keys can make you feel sad,
Yep.
and you can do this and you can do that. And there's certain things, I don't want to call them tricks, but there's certain things that evoke certain feelings
Yes.
or might work for a hit.
Yes, and it's there's a craft to it, and then there's a mystery to it.
Right, and then there's a total gift to it,
you can go. I mean, if there wasn't a mystery to it, the pros would go in and write a hit every time, but they can't.
Right, exactly.
And I do think there are periods of to the point that you make, like with Joe Jackson putting out 2 amazing albums in a year. I do think I think Elton John referred to them once as purple periods, which are periods when all of a sudden all the great stuff is coming to you.
Yeah.
And I used to study charts not as a kid. I mean, I studied them for years because I was sort of fascinated with the arc of an artist's commercial success.
Right.
And it's changed now because the way people get music is different. But up and through the radio period when radio drove everything, the peak of the most successful artists' commercial success lasted 5 years.
Right.
That
was huge. That was quite a stretch.
That's a long ststretch. And you might get an outlier, a decade later. But primarily, if an artist had, 15 top 40 hits, 12 of them or 13 of them would be within a 5-year range.
Gotcha.
And it didn't matter unless you were, Elvis or Elton or somebody like that. For the most part, that was it. And that was the first thing that sort of woke me up to, culture moves on very quickly when it's done. And it's very interesting to see who endures or comes back, or who doesn't hit culturally when they're alive or around, but might suddenly find life later on, like a Nina Simone, who I think may be more revered now in some ways than she was when she was actually performing.
You make me think of Nick Drake.
Yes, exactly.
Nick Drake. Well, no appreciation while he was here, but then it's genius, those 3 albums he did.
It's like
Nina Simone, yeah.
As somebody said to me, it's like it's so disappointing. This was a painter who said to me, I don't know whether to paint this painting because I don't know if anybody will see it. And I said, well, if you don't paint it, they never will.
Right.
I said, what you can hope, the same way with an album.
Chicken or the egg type of
Yeah,
thing.
exactly. And it's like sometimes you make an album and it doesn't find an audience in its moment, but 20 years later, people realize, oh, that's actually the best thing they made.
Yeah, which is it's great, and I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. We're here with Anthony Mason, senior correspondent for CBS News Television. He's got a new show on YouTube, independent program that he's put together himself called Alchemy with Anthony Mason. Google it, go to YouTube, search for it, Alchemy with Anthony Mason. in-depth conversations about the creative process. He is a New York City guy and an East End of Long Island guy his entire life. We are so psyched to have him here on the Afternoon Ramble. I'm Brian Cosgrove. You can go to WLIW.org/radio. We've got the cameras on, a rare time during my show when the cameras are on, because Anthony is here, and I want to show...
He's torturing me.
Exactly, because Anthony is here. So you know what? I've got queued up some Hozier. You spoke to Hozier, so I'm going to play something from Hozier, Anthony, and then we'll come back and talk about that. And thank you for, and then we'll thank you for coming by. How's that?
My pleasure.
Anthony Mason on WLIW-FM, and as promised, the 6'7" Irishman Hozier. Take me to church on WLIW-FM. WLIW-FM, Hozier, Take Me to Church. My very special guest this afternoon on the Afternoon Ramble is Anthony Mason, senior correspondent for CBS TV News, but he's got a brand new independent YouTube show called Alchemy, in-depth conversations about the creative process. And Anthony is a New York City, East End of Long Island guy his entire life, so that's a pleasure as well. And he, in fact, there is a show with Hozier.
Yes.
He's 6'7". I can't get over it. I can't, because I see him on things and I don't realize how, you know.
No. He's also, one of the things that also fascinated me about it, which we talk about in the show, is he's actually a beekeeper, too.
No kidding.
Yeah. I mean, I said to him, I've been, because I work in television, I'm always looking for interesting visuals. Yeah. And when I heard this, I said, I'm like, I've got to come to Ireland where you keep bees. And he's like, you have an open invitation. I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this.
Right.
But they were actually given to him by his parents, and I was like, what possessed them? He goes, I have no idea. They gave me a beehive. But he's actually the first guest we had on the show, and the reason was I had interviewed him several times, and I just knew how thoughtful he is and how eloquent he is about the creative process. And it's, he was everything I hoped for in a first guest.
Right.
Because he's
a nice guy.
He couldn't be a nicer guy.
He's a genuine guy.
Here's the thing. He had no album to promote. He wasn't selling concert tickets. I just knew he was going to be in New York for a benefit concert, and I reached out and I said, any chance you would do this? And within 48 hours, I got a yes. And I was just like, and I have to tell you, because my wife came, that ran a little late that day. And my wife came home, and all the gear was still in the house. But when she turned the corner and saw Andrew Hozier Byrne is his full name, sitting in the living room, everything was fine.
That's because he's an attractive man as well.
He does, yes. The ladies like him, as they say.
The ladies like him.
And so she was just like, she got to talk to Andrew in the living room. It's very funny. I mean,
I'm looking forward to it. That's my next. I'm going to do Nile next. Nile Rogers. I'm going to do, because briefly I met him like 10 years ago out here. He did a benefit concert, and what an extraordinary talent Nile Rogers is.
Ridiculous.
I mean, with Chic and then the production stuff and the
people don't realize the degree to which his fingerprints are all over American music.
And the sound that he created with Chic is so so there's these shows are already accessible for Alchemy with Anthony Mason on YouTube. You can Google it. Paul Simon, Hozier, Nile Rogers, Brittany Howard from Alabama Shakes.
No, that will drop in a couple of weeks. They're 5 out. Muna, the band Muna.
Okay.
Violet Grohl, Dave Grohl's daughter, who has her debut album out. That's the most recent one.
Okay.
The next one will be Taj Mahal next Wednesday.
Whoa.
And then Brittany Howard 2 weeks after that.
But so Hozier, Paul Simon, and Nile are there.
They're there.
Okay, great. And that's, again, it's called Alchemy with Anthony Mason. Just Google it or go to YouTube. And, I was thinking, you were talking about, I think you were doing it was probably not for Alchemy. No, it wasn't for Alchemy. It was for CBS. But I'm a big Casey Musgraves fan.
Yes.
Very big. I mean, I've been playing her, and I don't, look, I'll take a pat on the back for it, but I've been playing her since Same Trailer, Different Park.
Yes.
Since the first album.
It's a great album.
Because of the nature of being on public radio, because of the eclecticness that I'm able to play, it was more of a country sound. But I tell you, I thought it was very it was pretty funny when you were talking to her about her new single, Dry Spell.
Yes.
I was laughing out loud, which I normally don't do. Here is this beautiful woman who's talking about having a dry period in her love life.
Yes.
And she wrote this tremendous song about it.
It's so good.
It's like, what doesn't add up? But I mean, if she really wants to know about a dry period, a dry spell, she can come see a 65-year-old single public radio DJ.
I think that song is really kind of a masterpiece. It's because it's a sort of double entendre, but I mean, it's so perfectly constructed.
It's a great
It works on two completely different levels.
Yes.
And every time it comes on the radio, I just go, oh, this is so good.
It is a good song. The whole album is good.
Yeah, it's a great
Nowhere.
album.
Yeah,
well, she's a phenomenal songwriter.
Yeah,
she really is.
She is. Yeah, she is. And I gotta, this again. I have a lot of admiration for the fact that this is an independent venture for Anthony Mason, Alchemy, the show on YouTube. It's about the creative process, which is just fascinating. And, you can just go down a rabbit hole and you talk to these folks who are so talented, who can just, you find a side to folks when you talk about the creative process that I love. There's a humility about it that they just...
Well, it's really humbling.
It is humbling,
because
you never know what's going to stick.
Well, and the other thing is,
and it doesn't have to be a hit, but it just has to be something that's that rings true with one person, for art's sake. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just. I mean, it's the humbling part is even if you've written a great song or a song that becomes massively popular. I mean, so many artists will tell you. Then they have a crisis and think, well, I'm never going to write another one again.
I'm sure it happens every time they write a song.
Almost every time.
I'm never going to be able to do it again.
Yeah.
It's writers go up against that. They write a book, it becomes a hit or a bestseller. Like, I can't do that again.
No. And so it's the fear, it's the doubt, it's all those enemies that that come at you, and how do you cope with them? And I think in the end you just have to. I met this artist in New York, Leonardo Drew, who blew my mind because I was walking through the Soho Arts District and I saw something on the wall. It looked like it was something exploding and coming at you, and it was enormous. And I walked in and I realized he'd actually made every piece of it himself. It wasn't debris, and it was incredible. And I went and I found him. And he told me his whole story, and he'd grown up in Connecticut, in the projects in Connecticut, and he had been recruited by the comic books to draw. He was kind of a prodigy that way, and he threw it all away after he read a Jackson Pollock book, and had seen Jackson Pollock's paintings. And he said, I decided wanted to get rid of all representational drawing, and he kind of threw himself into this abyss. He's like, I walked over the cliff, and I thought, wow, is that gutsy or what?
It spoke to him though. He felt that he could do it.
I so admired that he was willing to walk away from everything that was familiar to him, and that had got him noticed. And he's a very successful artist now. And this piece I saw just blew my mind. But
that's a great story.
Those people who are unafraid and walk into that space they don't know, I admire so much.
It made me think that the inspiration he got was more powerful than the fear.
Yeah.
Which says volumes for that, whatever that is, whatever that feeling is, that he was able to say, you know what? All right, I'm scared to do this, but this Jackson Pollock thing speaks to me. If there's something there, and I'm going to go. I'm going to go and see what it brings me. And evidently, it worked because it struck a chord with you. And that's the thing, things... And Paul Simon was talking about this, not just in music or maybe just not in art. He referred to Bernie Williams in the Alchemy interview that Anthony Mason does with Paul Simon, that sometimes he would go up to bat and the baseball would be the size of whatever.
Yeah.
And it would be nice and slow.
Yeah.
And they say that, hitting a baseball, it may be the hardest thing in sports, right? Because it comes at you 100 miles per hour, right? Hitting a home run, right? Yeah. And the thing is that when you get into, he called it flow, I think, right? Or you get into that zone. And it doesn't have to, it's like when you go to it even could be something for me with, going to the supermarket and just being able to maneuver the aisles with your cart and not have people, other people who are in your way or driving. Some days it's like I can't get out of my own way, and then other days it's like I get to work, no traffic. This happens. The coffee's great. This is, and then there's usually it's a combination of things, but. That's the thing.
Sometimes it just all falls into place, and and you want to be able to make that happen every day, and you can't.
No, you can't. Yeah. It's unfortunate, but you can't, and that's what, and I have to tell you, that's what makes you appreciate when it does.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is
and to run as hard as you can with it for as long as you can.
To milk it as long as you can.
That's what they always say to tell artists is, like when you get a couple of hit songs, you gotta run hard, because these things don't last long.
No, they don't.
Yeah,
then that's also the other side of the coin, as you are well aware of, Anthony, is that you wrote this hit, let's write another one that sounds just like it.
Yes.
And then then you're not being true. You're writing not for yourself, or you're not writing for the muse or whatever it might be, but you're writing to make a hit, and that doesn't work. And you brought that up with Paul Simon. You said he never did. No. I mean, he's always been, thankfully, he's always been very successful, which allowed him to continue his amazing body of work, as you said. And I'm with you. I don't think there's any other song catalog for me that that's has lasted so long, and the quality of it for Paul Simon from whatever the late '50s, or early '60s up until today.
Yeah.
But it's just extraordinary that he never sat down or never had this is going to be a hit.
I think he's very discerning in terms of, he always wrote for himself. I think it was just that simple. He always has. And I think that's really important. But, and he made that, New York Times put out a list recently of the 30 greatest living American songwriters. And actually both Paul, and it's a very controversial list.
Yes, I saw it too.
Yeah, all sorts of people who you think should be on it aren't. But Nile's, Nile is on it as well, which I was really happy to see, because Nile's contributions are so often overlooked. I mean, because people don't realize, I think, the degree that what his contribution to American music, which
I couldn't agree with you more.
Because his name isn't prominently on those things, but Let's Dance by Bowie and Sister Sledge, We Are Family, and Madonna. He produced Like a Virgin for Madonna. The run he had was insane. Get Lucky with Daft Punk.
Right. Yeah. Anthony Mason is with us, and it's such a pleasure. His new independent YouTube show is called Alchemy with Anthony Mason. I urge you to Google it or go to YouTube and search for it, because it's just great. Lots more to come, and we hope that we're going to get Anthony back here. I wanted to, we're talking about Paul Simon a lot because, Paul Simon's a New York guy. He's back at Forest Hills tonight. He's on your show. He's a Montauk guy forever.
Yeah.
He's had a place in Montauk, and and he's back to the place where he grew up, Forest Hills, tonight for a second night, where he went to high school, where he met Art Garfunkel, and which is just extraordinary. So please go to Alchemy with Anthony Mason. Find the show. It's just extraordinary stuff, and we hope to have you back. There was, I think, how long ago, and this was a CBS thing, so I hope you don't mind.
No, of course.
Because I was thinking about the Rolling Stones tomorrow have a new album coming out.
Yes.
And I'm playing the single, and I'm looking forward to.
I really like the single.
Me too.
Yeah.
And again, that's like, I kind of cringe when I'm like, oh geez, I'm doing another one. Let's see what happens. But I'm a big Keith Richards fan. Now, how you fairly recently you sat down with Keith Richards?
I did for Hackney Diamonds. Yeah.
You did, okay.
Yeah.
So. And this, Anthony, this, if you don't do anything, you talk to, it's so great. You talk to Keith Richards about mortality.
Yeah. I can't remember what he said. What did he say?
I have the
do you?
Should I play it?
Sure, if you want to.
All right, let me see if I can find it here real quick. This was a recent...
Somebody put another clip up a couple of days ago from that interview, and I was like, oh, that's actually really cool.
Yeah.
But you can't, sometimes you don't remember what,
Now this was from CBS. This is Anthony Mason recently talking to Keith Richards about mortality.
The further you go down the pike, fewer and fewer friends are left around.
What does that say to you, if anything?
It gives you a sense of proportion, I suppose. And I told you I'd outlive you. Because I was the most likely to die for many years.
Does it make you feel more mortal?
Mortality, yeah, it does, actually.
You've always been convinced of your own the strength of your own constitution.
Oh yeah, but I don't. I mean, also I know how long my string is. But I'm prepared to face the maker.
So you've had that conversation with yourself.
Yeah, and me and the Lord. Yeah.
You've talked.
Yeah, we're on good terms.
I love that's Anthony Mason with Keith Richards talking about mortality, and why it took so long for an interviewer to talk to Keith Richards about mortality, I do not know, but I thank you for doing that.
He's one of my favorite people in the world to talk to. He's so funny.
Oh my God, to me, he is rock and roll in human form.
I think that's about right. That's about right.
Yeah, he is the real deal through and through. And the fact, those great jokes about, the two things that will survive a nuclear disaster, cockroaches and Keith Richards, and what kind of world are we going to leave for Keith Richards?
Yes. It is a miracle he's still alive.
It's extraordinary. The guy was a chain smoker for 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
I mean, he did all kinds of other things throughout his life, and we still got him, and they're still making great music, and that's to say, hope I die before I get old. The old My Generation line, right?
Yes.
The Who just looks like it probably was their last tour, wrapped up last year. But Roger Daltrey's going to be at Town Hall next month.
I saw Roger do a benefit concert. I think a year ago Christmas, and he was great.
Oh, he's amazing.
He was great. And Townsend, I heard Townsend's coming to Crossroads, I think in the fall. And I was thinking, God, I would love to talk to him again. I got to talk to him when his book came out years ago, and he's such a smart guy.
Oh, he is. And such a talented guy. And his solo stuff I love just as much as the Who stuff.
He said something to me that I'd never forgotten, which was, and it's not like I hadn't sort of thought about it, but when he said it, he was like the band got bigger than we did, and it was like the brand became so big they were obeying the brand, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And that's partly why you go out on tour, is like this, you've got to keep this thing you've built going.
Right.
And I'm like, well, that's kind of a tyranny, isn't it? And he's like, in some ways it is. You have to be really careful.
Yeah, and with with Keith Moon, with driving Rolls Royces into pools, and TVs out of hotel windows, and that whole image was something that you could perpetuate. Unfortunately, because that's what you were labeled as, and it's a tricky thing to get involved with. But the fact that we've got Paul Simon, who I think is 84 tonight.
I think that's right.
Right. Paul McCartney, who I think is 84, 85.
Yeah.
Ringo just turned 86 a couple days ago.
He's in great shape, too.
Right. These guys are still going. They're still playing music.
I know.
And I think the reason that they're still going is because they play music.
I think that I have to believe that has a lot to do with it.
I'd
mean,
say so,
at least the creation of the music. I do think the touring part is really hard.
It's grueling,
Keith said in an interview, I think a week or so ago, that he didn't think the Stones would tour again. They might play a residency.
Right.
But I think, it's the physical road stuff that just gets really hard. And I don't know how you do it. Frankly, I don't know how Bruce has been doing it for the last decade, because he was playing 3-hour-plus shows.
Yeah, he's still doing that whole spiel. Yeah.
I know. And I'm just like, I said to him when his book came out, and he was however long, that's like a decade ago now.
Yeah, it was 2016, I think.
Yeah, so it's like he was 65, and he was playing. I saw him in the middle of doing that story play a 3-hour and 40-minute gig, and I said, you could probably get away with playing an hour and 45. And he said, yeah, no. But it's true. And I'm like, I just want you to stick around longer. That's all.
Yeah, I got you. The other night I was lucky enough to go out to a place in East Hampton, and I saw Lyle Lovett.
Ah, yeah, I heard he was out there.
Yeah, I love Lyle Lovett, and he called it his small large band.
Yes.
He had a stand-up bass player, he had an acoustic guitar player, and an electric guitar player, top shelf guys.
Yeah.
Top shelf guys, and he played 2.5 hours.
Wow.
And he was just extraordinary.
Yeah.
And funny, talk about stories.
Yeah.
What a great sense of humor he has.
Yeah.
You know?
It's listen, if the artist still loves it, you know, we've all experienced that where sometimes an artist shows up and you're like, oh, they're phoning this in, you know.
Yeah.
And Paul talked about that in a conversation I had with him. I don't know if it might be an Alchemy, but he also talked to me.
He did talk about phoning it in.
Yeah, and he's like, you just don't want to be in that position, and so you've got to find something interesting to do. But on the other hand, they also, Nile was saying this to me, that it's, he said people don't want new music anymore. They want the hits, and it's really hard as an artist, just to keep playing the same songs.
Really hard.
Yeah.
Really hard.
You want to stretch yourself.
So I got the new Rolling Stones queued up, and I just want to say thank you so much for coming in.
It's been such a pleasure, Brian. Thank you so much for having this.
We could be here all night. You know? I could jawbone with you, Anthony Mason, all day long.
Well, we'll do it again.
Well, that's good. Let's do that. And again, let me just tell you that it's such a great show. I watched the Paul Simon interview. Nile Rogers is in there, and Hozier. More to come on Alchemy with Anthony Mason. It's an independent YouTube show that he's doing. He's got a not-for-profit organization that is behind him. What's the name of the not-for-profit?
Flag Art Foundation is behind us. We're going to be on podcast platforms, Apple and Spotify, in September, so stay tuned for that too.
There you go. Alchemy with Anthony Mason. And this is, in fact, the new one from the Rolling Stones, In the Stars on WLIW-FM.